Hey everyone, this is Jeremy with Teletone, and we just released the third instrument in our drum series. It is called Soulfi. It's out now, and it's become kind of a tradition that whenever we release a new instrument, we talk about the inspiration or the muse behind that instrument, which is exactly what I want to do today. And in the past, the Muse videos have been about different film directors, composers, artists. And this is going to be a little bit different today because we are talking about something that we don't normally talk about in our videos, and that is gear. Specifically, all of the gear that I use to make Soulfi sound like Soulfi. Just like many of you probably, I am a warm-blooded producer, and I love to nerd out and just talk about gear, look at equipment with big knobs, and you've probably seen all of this stuff just sitting here in the backdrop from a lot of our other videos, and it's never ever flipped on. But today we're going to talk about the process of recording all the drums for Soulfi, and then towards the end, I want to actually pull up a session that I used to record these drum samples and show you some of this equipment in action, show you the types of moves that I was doing to make that sound. So what is the sound of Soulfi? Well, we were trying to get the essence of a lot of music and the drums from 70s soul music, sampled vinyl, Motown. And so whereas our first drum instrument, tempo, we leaned towards like fat, dead, dry drums, I would describe these drums as very tight, crispy, punchy. They have a lot of bite to them. And so it's quite the contrast from the first drum instrument that we did. And in order to get that range of sounds from the references that I mentioned, it was going to take a different type of process to achieve that sound. So I think that most companies that make drum instruments do kind of what we did with Tempo, where you rent out a studio, you record as many drums as you can in a matter of days or weeks. But I wanted to spend a lot more time with each drum, mess with different tunings, changing out the heads, trying different things, and also physically manipulating the drums to get the very, very most out of it. So what are we talking about when we talk about physically manipulating the drums? Well, for one, I had ordered some new cymbals, and they came with this packaging to kind of keep the cymbals from scratching each other up. They came with several of these. And we recorded, for instance, each one of the hi-hats, we recorded them normal, but also we recorded them with a layer of this on top of it. I also tried putting it, in between the different cymbals. That's one way. I'll give you a few more examples. We tried putting a lot of different things on top of the snare drum. Sometimes I'd use this coaster flipped upside down, using duct tape to both tape things down, but also serve as a mute on top of the drums. This candle is something that I use. It's completely burnt out, but it has a little bit of a ring sound to it. And so we messed with putting this on top of the snare, the lid on top of the snare, basically any combination of things, recorded, listened to it back to see how it would sound. So of course we tried a bunch of different mic positions, but we also recorded some of the snares flipped upside down where the snare side was pointing up. You get a really, really tight, crispy sound when you do that. So that was kind of fun to do with some of the snares. For my wife's job, she does a lot with home decor, and so we just have things kind of lying around the house. I don't even know exactly what this is. This is something that I used a lot when we were recording the kick drum. My guess is that it's supposed to be some kind of pillow because there's like a zipper on the back. Maybe something goes inside of here. I'm not really sure. But in a lot of instances, this would be draped over the front of the kick drum where the beater would hit, and it would be hitting against this. And I also had a few different types of beater for the kick drum. Some of them were really, really soft. Some of them were harder. And so we would kind of compare and contrast those different things to get a wide variety of sounds out of the same physical drum. So all of that, and then of course we messed with a lot of different tunings, but most of the time we were going for a really, really tight sound. The heads stretched like as tight as they would go in some instances, and we were really, really excited about how it came out. Okay, so now that we talked about the method of kind of physically manipulating the physical drums, let's talk about the signal path. So I used exclusively ribbon mics on this instrument, a combination of old and new, but really leaning heavily on the old. The reason is I've noticed that, I don't know if this is going to make sense, I'll try to explain, but basically like I feel like condenser microphones, the ones that I've used in the past, they kind of they pull the sound into the microphone. I feel like ribbon mics, especially the ones that I was leaning on, are extremely dynamic. And it's more like they wait for the sound to come to them. And so when you're recording all these different velocity layers, especially like the really quiet ones, you don't really want your microphone like pulling that sound in. You want the dynamics to stay as you hear them with your ear naturally. And the first ribbon mic that I ever bought was this mid-1950s RCA 77D. I have a couple of these now, and these were used because they have like the bite that I was looking for. They really cut through. They have a very tight, crispy sound to them when you use them the right way. So these were like the perfect tool for the sound that I was looking for. And we supplemented the sound of the RCAs with this AEA R88, and I'm only going to say it once because I have to really slow down to get those words out. This is a stereo ribbon mic. I bought it brand new, and this was, as I said, to kind of supplement the sound of the other one. Sometimes we just needed something extra in the frequency spectrum that the RCAs were not really covering. So the RCA mics went through an AEA ribbon mic preamp. It's the RPQ2. We were just using the preamps on it. It has some cool EQ stuff that you can do with it, but I'll get into why we weren't using that here in a minute. So we were just using the preamps. There's a ton of gain that you can get out of them without it getting too noisy. They were great for that. So kind of old ribbon mic paired with the new preamp. We took the R88s and we put that through my Shadow Hills preamps, which you can see over here. We use the iron setting. The iron setting is based on the Neve St. Ives output transformer. Great sound. I mean, all of the settings sound great, but the iron ended up being the one that we thought sounded best. Okay, so now let's talk about the outboard gear that I use to kind of shape the sound of Soulfi. And I have this project open up. It's the snares project where I was recording all the snares for Soulfi. So let's take a look at that. And I'm just going to tell you right off the bat that because I'm right in front of my speakers and I have a microphone on, I need to have them turned down low so you're not getting a bunch of more noise than we already have in the room. And so I'm going to have this turned down a little bit low. You will be hearing this a lot better than I am, but I can still give you an idea of like how this stuff works and the way that I used it. So first up in the chain was this SMC2A by TubeTech. And it's a multiband compressor, and I wasn't using it really much as a compressor, but more like a tone shaper. And so we'll just look at that first. Here's and this is let's see, this is one of the, looks like a 50s leady snare that I had recorded, and I have the monitoring on, so even though you see these samples chopped up, what you're going to be hearing is actually going through the equipment. So let's take a listen to this first. I'm just going to show you kind of how I use the high, mid, and low bands to kind of shape the sound. So this is out. Let's go ahead and put it in. I'm going to extend this loop just a little bit. So sometimes I'd really just like take the highs and lows down all the way and try to find like what I wanted to get out of the mid-range first. And you use these two knobs over here to kind of adjust the crossover points to shape the mid-range. And again, we're looking for some bite. That's out, in. back out. So again, this is like, I was using this pretty gently and not really letting the compressor do much of anything, but just a general shaping of the tone. And this would vary pretty drastically depending on what drum I was using. Is it a kick? Is it a snare? What type of snare? Is it a piccolo? Is it a marching snare drum? So that is the SMC2A. I'll leave that out for now. Okay, now let's talk about these TubeTech EQs, the PE1Cs. There are a lot of EQs on the market that do the Pultec thing, but I think that the TubeTech version is pretty solid. And I've had these for probably close to maybe 15 years or so. These are some of the first things that I bought. And these are just a perfect match for those RCA 77Ds. And what's so fun about it is that this is a passive shelving EQ, and you can do really drastic moves with it, and it doesn't necessarily hurt your ears just to like start turning knobs, cranking them up. And so the way that these work, if you've never used one before, you can boost and attenuate the high and low frequencies. I also have the mid-range EQ right here, but I'm not going to use that right now. And so you have this frequency selector here at the bottom for the lows. It goes 20, 30, 60, or 100. And then on the high end, it goes from 1K to 16K with a bunch of positions in between. So the bandwidth is adjustable for the high frequencies. You turn it counterclockwise and it goes sharp. You turn it clockwise and it goes broad. Now, when I was younger and first starting out, I could never find much use for a super sharp bandwidth on an EQ. But that's because you kind of have to know what you're doing a little bit, and you don't use as much of it. Now, when you go all the way broad, you can use more of it, and it sounds more musical, but you're also boosting a lot more of the spectrum, so it's a little less specific. I love being able to dial that in here. So let's make sure we're set to the same thing. You have this attenuation selector up here. You can attenuate at 5, 10, or 20K as you are boosting. And last thing I'll mention before we listen to it is that with this low end, the attenuation is not the same as the frequency you selected. It's actually higher in the frequency spectrum. Like if you do boost at 60 hertz and then attenuate, it's probably closer to like 200 hertz where it's attenuating. So it gives you this slope that has a dip kind of higher in the frequency spectrum. So let's take a listen to this, and we'll just loop this same snare drum that I have right here. I'm going to switch over to 100, and let's hear a little boost, and it's probably going to get a little muddy. And so that's where you would want to try attenuating and see if you can tighten that up a little bit and cause it to dip a little bit. So this isn't really what I would do for this snare drum. I'd probably keep that turned down, and I may just attenuate only, because we're going for tight, crispy is what we want. So we'll add a little back in. All right, let's look at the high end now, and let's just start right in the middle as far as our bandwidth goes. And I'm going to set this to 5K because I know that I was utilizing that, that frequency quite a bit here. And we'll keep the attenuation on 20K. So it's going to roll off a bunch of that ultra high end. Hear how it's super snappy. Take the attenuation out. Let's go super sharp and narrow. There's a lot of bite to it. If you wanted to get some of the warmer tones, we'd go down to 1K and go broad. Let's attenuate at 10, see what that sounds like. Let's go more narrow. And I very rarely was doing a whole lot with any of this upper range as far as boosting goes. It's not the vibe. But you can even attenuate at 5K, switch these to 5K, attenuate, boost all the way, see what happens. Could be cool. And dial it back. So as I said, you're going to be hearing that a lot better than I am, but I wanted to kind of just show you how those EQs work in case you've never messed with them. Let's look at a different snare real quick. All right, let's look at one of these marching snares that's been tuned up really tightly. And this is going to be a very different sound. So let's just hear it with the EQ out. And now I can already tell that we're probably going to want to start attenuating some of the low end here because we want it tight and snappy. So that's kind of roughly one thing that I might try with that one. Again, my volume's a little bit low, so I'm just only hearing a little bit. But that kind of gives you a general idea of the types of gear that I was using to shape the sound of these Drums of Soulfi. It was as much fun as you think it was. It was a lot of fun. Okay, that's going to do it for our Muse video for Soulfi. Please check us out on Instagram at Teletone Audio. TeletoneAudio.com is the website. We have a walkthrough video that goes more in depth on the sound and function of Soulfi. We're gonna do a bunch of other videos exploring the actual samples, kits from Soulfi. So please be on the lookout for that on our YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching.